When you have a shop that is bubble gummed together and never has the right tools and equipment, and you can't hire technicians, you got to ask yourself one serious question. Why would they want to work for you?
From a recruiting standpoint, if you're struggling to find people and you're not asking that question, you're doing yourself a disservice. One area quickly that I'll point out there that I think is an area for improvement with a lot of shops is that
Today's guest is Goninen, co-founder and president of WrenchWay. He shares how he's tackling the technician shortage by connecting schools and shops, improving workplace culture, and building a stronger, more sustainable future for the next generation of technicians.
our purpose as a company was to promote and improve technician careers. I think we've talked about the technician shortage for a very, very long time. ASE had a statistic where I think it's roughly about 42% of technicians leave the industry within the first 2 years that they're in it.
And the other thing I want owners to understand too is that you will attract what you portray. So if you have a dirty, dim-lit, disorganized shop, you are going to attract dirty, dim, disorganized technicians.
It's not an easy job, and I think the more we understand that, the more we can start to put pieces in place to help make our teams happier.
What would you say is the number one thing that shop owners just don't get, and they're not understanding why they're having such a disconnect between themselves and the technicians?
In my opinion, I think a lot of it comes down to
Welcome to Diesel Stories, where we sit down with experts across the industry. Today's we have guest Goninen from WrenchWay. Thanks for being on today, Jay.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Great to see you.
So could you tell us a little bit about what is WrenchWay? What is it that you do, and fill us in on that?
It's kind of a constantly moving target of what it is, I think. But we, a little backstory here, started off in the recruiting world and trying to find technicians for shops, grew that to where we decided we wanted to be a job board. So in 2020, brought on a co-founder. That's really where the introduction of WrenchWay came on in building out a job board that allowed for technicians to do their due diligence on shops. Over the course of time, we started to, as we built this out, look at ways that we could help fix the industry, right? And I think we've talked about the technician shortage for a very, very long time. And so our purpose as a company was to promote and improve technician careers. And so we were always kind of looking for ways to do that. So we introduced something called School Assist in 2021. And this was truly to try and attack the issue at its core, in making sure that schools felt supported, that they did actually have support so they wouldn't go away. I know there's been a lot of schools over the years that we've seen just close their doors. Just got a report on another one here on Friday of a tech school closing their program. And so just being able to use the resources that we have as an industry to really support these programs and really shift the focus from maybe that one student in that one program to what can we do to support these programs so there's enough technicians for everybody. And so we built out School Assist as a way that's free for schools for them to ask for things. And then our network of shops are able to help them out. Well, as we were growing that side of WrenchWay, we started to form a relationship with ASE. And ASE has been just hugely impactful to us as an organization. They had a new leader come on about 2 years ago, and over 2 years ago now, and really kind of started to shift, I think, their culture, but then started to look at a lot of what we were doing and wanted to team up in an effort to really try and kind of pick away at this technician shortage. So earlier this year, we were able to announce a program called ASE Connects, which is an ASE-led program that we're running for them, essentially, right? So we're bringing the technology to really attack this shortage in a proactive manner and really trying to, we broke it down into 5 different steps and how we're going about this. And I'll share those 5 steps because I think it'll help with the conversation and understanding where we're going as a company. But the first one was to identify every single school that's out there. And they don't necessarily have to have an automotive program or a diesel program, collision program. We just want to get an understanding of how many schools are actually out there. So we started by just chronicling every single school that is out there, and really just kind of in an effort to get an idea of how many students are out there, right? And so that's kind of the second step of it, is get relevant industry data information, data from these schools, so that we know how many students are out there, right? I think there are a lot of reports around that talk about that data side, and really maybe don't have accurate information. So we wanted to really do it the right way. And so we went after it from that standpoint. And so the data side is a big component of that, something that will continue to build out and will continue to be difficult to find, way tougher than I would have thought going into it. But that is something we need to really go after. Third thing is bringing the elements of our school platform to ASE, so that schools do feel supported, and we are bringing them the support that they need to run thriving programs, not just kind of barely making it by, right? We want these schools to be powerhouses. And so how do we really wrap our hands around them? We identify ways that we can support them, and then go as an industry and help. The fourth piece is getting tracking information on technicians as they're entering our industry. ASE had a statistic where I think it's roughly about 42% of technicians leave the industry within the first 2 years that they're in it. So then we want to really take that to the next step, right? And understand, if they are leaving, why are they leaving the industry? And then if they're staying, are they happy? How happy are they? What could we do to make them more happy? And it really kind of helped with that retention side. And then the fifth point of all of this, and I think it might be the most important one, is that every year we're going to do all of that all over again, right? So that we don't want the information, we don't want the data to get stale. So every year, this is something that we're going to repeat over and over and over again, to really get good data, good information to give back to our industry, and hopefully able to help.
Well, and that actually brings me into one thing I do want to talk about a lot, and that is the report that WrenchWay publishes, the Voice of Technician report. Can you give me some background on that? Why did you start putting out that report? I mean, I know it's a lot of work to do this, and I really appreciate it, at least from my end, because as an owner of a shop and the manager of it, it really helps me understand. But can you give me some backstory on that report?
Yeah, I think the reason we started it was to give technicians a way to communicate back to the shops in a way that wasn't going to get them in trouble, right? We do this anonymously, so that you can't track responses from one specific technician. And really, we want that candid feedback, right? Because if we're missing the target as shops, like, we want to understand why we're missing the target, where we're missing the target, and really do it in a way that with numbers, we're able to get good information to give back to the industry. And I think that's what we've been able to do. This is our third annual report that we've done. Each year we learn something more from it. I do get concerned because at times the report could be perceived as being negative, because a lot of what we hear back from technicians is negative. And so we're trying to use it as a way to hopefully drive conversations for you as a shop owner, or for that shop leader that's out there, to really try to understand their own shops. And it's been fun and challenging at times, because you are giving some candid feedback that maybe people don't want to hear, or maybe don't agree with. But this is from 5,500 technicians that got back to us, and they wanted to tell us what was going on with them, right? And it's not a short survey. There's kind of there's a lot there. And so my hope is that even if you disagree with something in the survey, it drives some level of conversation between you and your team. Because if you do that, if you use it as a communication tool, I think it helps you get a better understanding of maybe where we're missing the ball at. And to be honest, there's a lot of shops that they're treating their people as well as they ever have. They're doing some really, really good things. And at some level, I think this is one of the first times where maybe technicians have that spotlight shine on them, right? And so they're able to give good feedback. And there are some things that are opportunities for us as shops that are over and above money, that can really help with that retention side of our shops. But it's still a lot about money, right? I think the technicians want to make sure that they're taken care of for their skill level, and for kind of the abuse their body can take, and their mind can take at times, right? There's just a lot there. It's not an easy job. And I think the more we understand that, the more we can start to put pieces in place to help make our teams happier.
And let's face it, it's not an easy job. I mean, I came from the tech world. I was a tech, and you say taking a toll on body. I absolutely can contest to that. That it's not something that a lot of people are able to sustain to retirement. Like I've seen very few technicians out there that are 72 years old that are still turning wrenches. It does have a high attrition rate, and I would like to start with that question: do we have anything in the data that shows why there's such a high turnover in the first few years of entering this industry?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can point to, and I'll just speak about the survey in the way we laid it out a little bit. So if you look at the actual survey, we break it down into different components, which are what technicians want. So asking them about what they would look for in a potential employer, what their current satisfaction is with their current employer, and then the last one, and this was kind of an added section that we added because there were so many educators, so many instructors that wanted to participate in this, is looking at that partnership between industry and school. So the two that we'll focus on here are what technicians want and the technician satisfaction side. When you look at what technicians want, it's really interesting to me in that a lot of these technicians are more tenured, right? Most of them have 20 plus years of experience. Funny story about that is when we first launched this survey, I was worried it was going to be the opposite way, right? Like I thought we were just going to have all students take it, and we weren't sure that the data would be useful, but it's been the opposite of that, where we're getting a lot of really, really experienced technicians. So I'm bringing up a chart right now for those that are watching this, to where you can see what technicians are looking for in employers. So this is something that, as we look at this, that you really got to keep in mind is these things are very important, even if they're on your current staff, right? And my business partner, Mark Wilson, in a webinar we did, kind of reframed my thinking on this, because how he views this is that he likes to take the must have and the nice to have and combine them so you get a better picture of really what those technicians are really, really wanting versus what they don't feel is important. And so at the top of the chart, you can see proper equipment in the shop. This is something we've seen year over year where they really, really do care about that proper equipment, not just having the proper equipment, but making sure if it's a scan tool that it's up to date, or if you've got maybe some lift equipment that hasn't had certification and it really hasn't been taken care of, they're worried about their safety, right? So proper equipment in the shop continues to be right up there. One of the things that seems to be trending upward is paid vacation, paid training, no weekends. You're starting to see more of those schedule related things be very, very important to technicians. So that part I don't think is surprising to a whole lot of people, but if you're that shop that's out there, that's something you might want to start having a conversation about internally, is that if you're seeing that you've got staff that are really wanting more flexibility and they might have a kid's soccer game at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, that you accommodate that, right? Because you're going to have more loyalty to you as a company if you continue to kind of be flexible and try to work with them, knowing that the life of a dad has changed over the years, right? Like when I grew up in a shop, it was very rare my dad ever made any of my games or made any of the stuff that I would have felt was important. And he probably did too. He just didn't have time to do it being in a shop. And so that flexibility and the expectations of a parent now, I think, are a lot different than maybe what they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So you're seeing more and more of that flexibility kind of coming through in the numbers. You can see 99% of technicians thought it was at least nice to have paid vacation. And one area quickly that I'll point out there that I think is an area for improvement with a lot of shops is that a lot of times if we're bringing on a new tech, maybe we don't give them vacation until after a year that they've been at the shop. I'll tell you, I think that's a deal breaker for a lot of technicians to come work for you. If you don't offer vacation within that first year, I think it's going to be a struggle for you to find people.
I think it is. And I think this is eye-opening for a lot of people. And that is that it's crazy to think that in this modern day and age with everything going on, that technicians care as much about, or in previous years, I know what the survey said, they care more about proper tools and equipment than they cared about wages and vacation. And if you were to ask an owner that, I don't think they would ever give you this answer. Like, it's crazy how far off our ownership mindset is from what the reality of a technician is.
Well, it's a little surprising to me because this might speak to their current employers right now too, right? Like, how many shops must not have proper equipment in the shop if this is if this is one of the things that kind of consistently comes through towards the top. I know in my just dealings or conversations with technicians, when they go to work for a good shop with good equipment, they definitely complain less, right? If they are taking care of there, of course, there are other elements like leadership and things maybe outside of tooling, but tooling is very, very important to technicians.
Well, it is. I mean, it's their job. It's, I say we need three things in this industry to fix things. We need tools, equipment, and time. And, when we don't have one of those key factors, it's pretty hard to do your job. The other thing I want to remind owners of too, and this is just trying to get people in the right headspace, is when you have a shop that is bubble gummed together and never has the right tools and equipment, and you can't hire technicians, you got to ask yourself one serious question: why would they want to work for you?
Yeah, I don't think that question gets asked enough, Peter. Like if you're looking at from a recruiting standpoint, if you're struggling to find people and you're not asking that question, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Because there's obviously something that's not overly appealing. And you never want to be the one to call somebody's their baby ugly, right? Like you don't want to do that. But with a lot of us in our businesses, I think the thing about a lot of them is that they're not that far away from being really, really good at a lot of this stuff. If they took a second and took a step back and looked at their operations. And I do think things have changed over the years from where when I grew up in the industry, you were lucky to have a job. It's kind of the opposite of that now, right? Like
Yeah.
as a shop owner or manager, you're lucky to have that person working in the shop, and you need to view it that way because if you don't, we see this on the dealer side a lot where, and it came through in the survey, where a lot of times it feels like you're a number. And whenever you feel like you're a number, you're not fighting for the greater purpose of the whole shop. There's less loyalty to you, right? And there's less want to go to work for you. So again, going back to the whole purpose of the survey in the first place, if it helps a shop owner drive that conversation internally, I think that's the best thing that could happen, right? Because then you're starting to look at that through a growth mindset type of situation where you're actually looking at this and saying, what can we do better? What can we do to be the best in our area? And even if, guess what, we're not profitable enough to pay at the top of the market, what can we do to make that almost a secondary piece of it, right? Like, can we offer so many benefits? Maybe we can offer more flexibility than one of the more corporatized shops that won't offer that flexibility. Like just kind of looking at it through the lens of a technician, saying, what can I do to take care of these folks because they're helping us?
Well, and that was one of my philosophies when I started my shop. Was I actually took inspiration from the technology and industry. I was looking at, well, what does Google do? How is it Google can hire the best engineers in the world and they actually want to work there? And it's not because they have a foosball table and that, it's because they value what they do. They treat them, a lot of store owners talk about, well, you ask them, well, why would someone want to work for you? And they said, well, we're like family. And I'm like, what is it that you do that's like family? Like, I've been to your break room. You don't even have bottles. You don't even have cold water in there. Like, last time I checked, my kids could get cold water at home. Like, you say that it's a family, but is it really? And that's one of the things I had a really hard conversation. And honestly, it's one of the things I like about my job being a consultant in a lot of ways is I'm not afraid to have the hard conversation. I was in Southern California and I was talking to a shop owner. It's a multi-generational shop. And I said, dude, you got to come look at this. He's like, what? I'm like, why would anybody want to work here? He's like, what? I'm like, half your lights don't work. He's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It isn't to you, but it is to them. Like, I have never seen the biggest impact in my life of the attitude of a shop is the day they walk in and has all new lights.
You're so correct right there. And that even the proper lighting kind of falls into that proper tooling bucket, right? Because if you have terrible lighting, everything's a mess. It's not very presentable to anybody that walks in the backside of a shop. How are you going to attract the best and brightest with an environment like that, right? You're not going to, because they're not going to settle for that. And going back, I've talked a lot about this with whether it's at the Diesel Connect conference or just over the years with a lot of shops, where you've got to come to terms with the fact that you're not the only shop. You're not even the only business that's in the market for this person if they're good. You need to be able to figure out what is different about you. And, if you're treating your people right, I think you'd be shocked. I know there's shops that are listening to this that probably are in this bucket where they have their team going out and speaking highly of them. And maybe they go to a cocktail party or they're out with their buddies somewhere. And, when you take care of a tech, I think a lot of times that's where they're going to tell their story at, right? Hey, they take pretty good care of me. I like working there. They're good people. I like to hang out with them. Whereas when you go on social media, all you're going to hear is the negative, right? You're just going to hear everybody talking poorly about the industry, maybe even about their own shop. And so all of that to say, the more you kind of keep that in mind as a shop is like, how am I growing this? How am I making this better for my technicians? And if that it takes, a weekly conversation with your internal management team to say, what are we doing? What's the next step? What are we doing to get better? What are we doing to get better? I think that's where you'll start to see some growth. But if you just kind of sit on your hands and accept that those lights don't work and don't think it's that big of a deal because you're not in the shop every day and you're not trying to see that part that you can't get to, it's almost communicating without talking, right? Where you're saying, I don't value you enough to get you proper lights, right? Like that doesn't seem like a family atmosphere, does it? Like that doesn't seem like something that would attract the best and brightest.
Yeah, and the other thing I want owners to understand too is that you will attract what you portray. So if you have a dirty, dim lit, disorganized shop, you are going to attract dirty, dim, disorganized technicians. It's the theory of birds of a feather flock together. You will attract what you show. And so owners, I go to shops all over the country and they're always telling me that we want the best employees, we want the brightest employees. And I said, but why? Why would they want to be here? And I think this survey really speaks to that. And I really wanted to ask you, so, you have more information, of course, than even what you could put in this survey. What would you say is the number one thing that shop owners just don't get? And they're not understanding why they're having such a disconnect between themselves and the technicians.
In my opinion, I think a lot of it comes down to leadership in just knowing that if your expectation is that the technicians are going to come tell you what's wrong with the shop, or if you're expecting that the technicians are the one driving the conversation, I think that's where you're setting yourself up for failure. It should be, as a leader, in your head that my job is to drive communication with my team so that I know if they're frustrated or not. I know if we have a tool that's outdated and we need to get an updated one. Like you need to really kind of take accountability for that. Any leadership class you ever take, they talk about accountability. They talk about, owning that piece of it. I think that's where we make a lot of assumptions as leaders rather than actually going directly to the source and talking to our teams about it, right? So to me, and this is in the survey, this is just in general and my conversations with technicians, I think a lot of times it comes in communication breakdown, and that's where we have to get better. Communication's really easy to talk about. It's really hard to do on a consistent basis. And so I've learned that the hard way myself. I had a technician several years ago that worked for me. I always loved this story because it was embarrassing on my part, but, went out, talked to this technician, just said, hey, how are things going? Having a good conversation with this tech, and oh man, I love it here. This is the best place I've ever worked. And, it just couldn't talk any higher of the shop. Well, it wasn't a month later that technician resigned. And I was like, what happened? Like, I brought him in my office and I'm like, we just talked. And he's like, I just had some weeks where I wasn't getting along with somebody in the shop. And then he like kind of had this laundry list of the other side of things. And he was kind of an emotional guy. So I think it was playing to his emotions in general. But that was kind of a lesson to me that, you know what, I talked to him 1 month and then 1 month later, everything changed. And so I, as a leader, didn't do a good enough job of kind of having that finger on the pulse and understanding that, in that scenario, had I gotten out in front of that a little earlier, could I have fixed something to make him stay or make him more happy? Or was it just that he was going to be dissatisfied regardless of what we did for forever? My take there was that I had a conversation with him at one point where he was a raving fan of working there. It just so happened to be that it was a few weeks later that his mind changed on that, and there's not much he can do at that point, right? Like when they resign and they're ready to go, unless you're going to throw a bunch of money at them to stay, and then you're kind of at the mercy of the tech at that point, right? Where if you throw a bunch of money at them to stay, wouldn't be shocked if a year later they're doing the same thing, going and looking and hunting for another offer, coming back to you and trying to get more money. And so it is a weird part of the relationship, but in my own experience, that's one where I did not do a good job as a leader, and I learned from it after the fact. Am I perfect at it? Absolutely not. But it is one of those things that I'm consistently trying to get better at, consistently trying to drive more conversations and knowing that that falls on my shoulders as a leader. I need to drive those conversations and I need to make sure I'm on top of it.
Well, and one of the things I tell owners too is if the technician is a direct report, meaning you don't have a facility manager, a store manager, a shop manager, whatever term you want to use, that you should have off-site meetings with your employees. And I know people are going to say this is crazy and I don't have time for it. And it's like, how much time do you devote every time you have to hire a new person to onboard them, the training, the interviews, and all the BS that goes through to hire a guy? Like, how can you afford not to? And so one of the things I always recommended is at least twice a year, take the guy to lunch. Like literally sit down one-on-one off-site. It's got to be off-site. And you will be surprised how much, and I don't want to say technicians lie, but let's face it, they're not totally honest because they're so guarded. Because naturally, technicians are just not the type touchy-feely kind of guys for the most part. Like, I'm going to generalize here, but I came from this industry and I've spent my whole life in it. It's not like you're hiring an English professor that's going to write a poem and tell you about their woe. Like these guys have this guarded sense of I can't talk about it. It's what I call pretend normal. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Builder's not fired. Everything's fine. And if we can get guys out of that environment, if we could sit them down and have a beer with them after work or take them out to lunch, yeah, it's an hour of your time, but that's only 2 hours a year. And I guarantee you will get information out of that technician you never would have got standing at their toolbox.
Oh, I love that. And I'm the same way. We've got our own family shop, and I try to take our service manager out to lunch once a day or once a week, I'm sorry, just to kind of get a feel for how things are going with him and maybe things that, just talk about life a little bit, right? And talk about, maybe not have it all be numbers driven conversation. But then the technicians I try to do the same thing with, and we've got a tech that's very quiet, so it's almost out of his comfort zone to go take him out to lunch. But it does, every time seems to loosen him up a little bit. We've got another tech that'll talk your ear off. Like you've got kind of these different levels of techs, but I think it just shows that you care about them as a person and you do care what they're trying to tell you and you do care about, their challenges in the shop. And I think a lot of times with techs, if they know that things are going the right direction or that you're giving them hope that you're working toward making their life better, they're going to be a lot happier. And out of the survey, one thing I would point to is that I believe it was like 71% of techs do not believe that the industry is heading in the right direction, which is scary because what does that do? That takes away hope that things are going to get better. And if our entire industry is built around technicians and they don't feel like it's moving in a positive direction, we've got an uphill battle to fight, right? And so how do we as shops make sure, one, at a local level, we're taking care of our techs, we're doing everything we can to give them that hope that we're building towards something bigger and better for them down the road. And then truly I understand and identify, like if they don't have hope that it's getting better, that's where we've really got to step up. We've got to have those conversations with our teams and do it in a proactive way. Don't wait until something gets bad. Like drive that conversation, drive that communication. And one example that I've given, and I've seen a lot of shops do this over the years now, is that they'll take this report and they'll use it as a conversation piece with their technicians, right? They'll go through and say, how do you think, if you were to rate us 1 to 10 on this topic, how do you think we're doing? And I think if nothing else, putting a number on it might drive a conversation of like, well, I think we could use some improvement here. And, here's where I think we could get better. And like the more you can ask a better question in that scenario. And even like in my example, I've got a really quiet technician. the more I can get that person talking and giving me feedback, I think that helps them. It helps drive some hope. And if you're turning that into action and you're making it better for them, that's where I think that glimmer of hope starts to get a little brighter as well.
What I think it comes back to too is that, do you understand your people? A lot of owners think they know their people, but they really don't. And then they get surprised. Like, as an owner, if you've ever been surprised by something a technician's done, like exiting, that generally means you don't understand what's going on. And we all are guilty of it. I mean, I've ran a lot of shops and I've seen a lot of things, but I do know that as owners, our perception of reality is not usually what it is, because we're looking at the world through our lens. We think that we look through the world through a technician lens, but even then we're skewed by the fact that we were a technician, but now we're an owner. And you have to understand that these technicians are not owners. They're never going to own it the way you own it. They're never going to feel the way you feel. And I really feel that more shop owners need to do. I encourage all of my clients to do quarterly anonymous surveys. And honestly, a lot of us already have the technology to do it. It's built into our HR or our payroll systems. You have the ability to send anonymous surveys and ask simple questions like, do you feel supported by your manager?
Oh, I love the fact that you're pushing that out to your shops, because I think that is really, really important. The other piece, and I'd be curious in just asking you a question here. This is one that I think is a unique challenge that a lot of shops have, is that they may have a technician on their staff that they don't necessarily like, right? Like whether it's a personality thing or it's they don't work very hard, but I can't find anybody else to replace them. So then I'm just gonna ride it out here until I find somebody. And it feels like whenever I see a shop that kind of goes down that route, it jades their attitude a little bit as leaders. But then it's also like you've got this person, we're talking about how you make life better for your technicians. But if you've got a technician that maybe you aren't necessarily in love with, it's going to be hard for you to do that. So I think, again, even like looking at as you're building out your staff, I'm a huge fan of developing young people and doing it in a time where you're not desperate for help, like doing it in a way where you actually have a sustainable system of bringing people in. I think what that allows you to do is really focus on the person and the character and who you're bringing in, because then you've got the personality you like. Now it's putting all the other stuff around it. And whereas a lot of times if we're desperate and you just hire an experienced technician because we're getting yelled at by customers, we need to get this stuff out, you end up hiring out of desperation. And that is so hard to build a
Absolutely.
culture around when you do that. And I do think that is something maybe our industry doesn't talk enough about, because I guarantee there are so many shops that are out there that are like, yeah, Jay, of course I want to take care of my people, but there's a couple that maybe if they left, it wouldn't hurt my feelings all that much. And I'm like, that speaks to culture right there. That speaks to like, you don't
Yeah.
have the right team.
Yeah. And so one of the things I tell owners when I go into their facility and evaluate it is, you have a culture whether you realize it or not. So whether you've intended for your culture to be the way it is, or it just happened by chance, you have a culture. And really something that plays to that point is that when you have those technicians that are not the greatest technician, you find that owners are managing from a place of fear. And this is something I talk about a lot, even on my own podcast that I do, is that so many of us have a customer funnel. We go out and hire salespeople, we do Google ads, we do mailers, we do all this stuff to bring in customers. And almost nobody has a labor funnel. Like, what are you doing to bring people in? And you've got to look at it from a long term. This is like an investment. It's like your retirement. You can't wake up one day when you're 55 years old and go, oh, I should probably put some money in retirement. It's too late. So I always challenge shop owners, what is your 5-year plan for employees? And they say, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, who are you prospecting now that is going to be your master tech 5 years from now? And they have no concept of this. And I'll be honest with you, the absolute best technicians I ever employed in my life were the guys that I hired as a tire loop tech. It took me 5 years to turn them into a master level tech. And they were incredibly loyal. They stuck it out. They owned it. Like, they owned that shop like it was theirs. Like, they treated it that way. They would stay late without being asked because they knew it was important. They knew the schedule. They were engaged. Like, these are the type of employees you want. But that doesn't happen by accident. That's what I used to tell my managers, Jay. I used to tell them, we don't fix trucks. We fix people. That's what you're here to do as a manager. And you have to understand that nothing you do really has anything to do with truly doing with fixing trucks. We fix people, the people fix trucks. And what that meant was I'm not trying to be a psychologist, but I'm just saying, basically, if you take care of the people, they'll take care of the business for you.
Oh, could not love that anymore. What I will say that I think was different about your approach than what I see with a lot of shops, in that this is one of the biggest compliments I could give somebody, is that you actually took a step back enough to have patience enough to allow that person 5 years to develop into that, right? Where a lot of times we'll see somebody, especially if it's like a fresh tech school grad, the expectations that we have of a young person coming into our industry, that they're going to be turning a bunch of hours and a bunch of time right off the bat, and that they should know everything. Like, man, this kid just got out of school. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing yet, or she doesn't know what she doesn't know what she doesn't know yet. And like, I think patience is such a missing piece to this equation, where you understood that it's going to take some time for somebody to develop their skills and even maturity, and just by doing that and approaching it the way that you did, you are driving that loyalty. You are driving, because why if I'm a technician and I see you just turning young people over and over and over again, or even experienced people, you're just firing them over and over and over again, why would I ever have any loyalty to you? You're not loyal to anybody else. Why would I have any loyalty to you? And then when you look at it, and if you bring somebody up and you find you're looking for traits as much as you are just mechanical ability, right? You're looking for somebody that fits who we are. That's how you build that culture. That's how you build that loyalty. That's how you build that really, really good master tech. But it takes a little bit of patience, and you had that patience that I think a lot of shops are missing.
Well, and I think there's two things in that people have to understand, and that is it is a numbers game. For every 10 apprentices I bring in, and yes, I love to use the word apprentice, even though it disappeared from our vocabulary. For every 10 apprentices I brought in, I was only turning 2 of them into a good tech. And I was okay with that. And I knew that's what it took. But here's the problem. If you don't recognize that, you get so easily discouraged by it. My wife was part of the business, and she could never handle that fact that, I tell people that running a business is like running a bus route. And I have a crazy thing because I used to run a bus company. But, a business is like a bus route. We know where we're going. It's on a schedule. People choose to get on because they want to go where we're going. And sometimes, just like a bus stop, people get off. And that's okay. Sometimes they've outgrown us. Sometimes we've outgrown them. I had a great technician, one of the best engine guys I ever had work for me. The guy was great, but he got an opportunity to go work in an air conditioning facility to do nothing but build engines all day long. Well, I was a small little independent shop. I couldn't provide that guy that opportunity. And you have to be happy for that person that they actually found what was right for them. And if you have that theory as an owner, it really creates an environment where people are like, it's okay. It's okay if what I tell people, one of the best things you could ever happen to a technician is they leave, because they're going to go somewhere else and realize, especially these young technicians, right, that don't know a lot, they're going to go somewhere else. And I guarantee you, if you've got a good culture, they don't last 2 weeks and they're back. And then they make great employees because now they have perspective. And the same thing's true with customers. Perspective is a very powerful thing. You have customers that will leave because they think they got a better deal or somebody's cheaper or whatever it might be. And they realize it's not all about that. It's the same way with technicians. I used to tell technicians when I would interview them, I would ask them flat out, why are you leaving? And almost always, it was never about pay. They weren't leaving their employer for pay. So when they would come to me and then we'd be having the interview, I would look them right in the eye and say, I'm not going to make you an offer. I said, I'd love to have you work here, but I'm not going to make you an offer. And they would look at me crazy like it. I'm like, look, I need you to recognize that you're not leaving for money. And what's going to happen is you're going to go back to your employer. You're going to tell them you're leaving. They're going to have a fear reaction. They're going to throw a bunch of money at you, and then you're never going to come work for me. So I would tell them flat out, and I want you to go to your owner, tell them that you're wanting to leave. And if you want to stay, stay. If you don't, call me and I'll make you an offer. And honestly, it stopped a lot of my wasted time, because I can't tell you how many times I hired a technician. Here's Monday morning and they never showed up. And then you come to find out, well, they stayed where they were.
And you're not alone there. I think I really enjoy your approach here, because in none of these things that you're talking about did it seem like you were acting out of desperation, right? Because how many other shops would actually have the patience to say, I'm not going to make you an offer? In most cases, if a technician comes in and that technician has good experience, they're going to be drooling to make an offer, right? And so just like anything, like, I think the less desperate you appear, the better off you're going to be, and I think the way that you act there is so important. And then the other thing I would mention that I really liked about your story there was that is something that you and I have very, I think, common views on, which is how you treat an employee that's leaving says so much about you as a manager and so much as you as a person. And it's laughable to me at times on how many of these businesses will say, well, we're a family, we're a family. And then if somebody chooses to leave, they just, they're the worst person in the world. We're never talking to this person again. And you're like, okay, they're leaving regardless. You may as well love them out the door, right? Like I still look back, one of my favorite jobs I ever had, I left early on in my career and they threw me a going away party. And I'll never forget that because we had all kinds of people there and they celebrated me going to that next step of my life. And I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world and forever kind of left an imprint in my head of like, this is a great company. They take care of their people even after they leave. And so I think you could look at so many instances where a technician or any other employee for that matter leaves a company and what does the owner do? They go start talking smack about that person behind their back and they're trying to like justify why this person's leaving and there's just a lot of general insecurities that come out of that and you're like, "No, just I've said constantly to any employee I've ever had, if you're leaving to make your life better and you can take care of your family better because of it, I'm gonna fully support you regardless." And, yeah, I do view my team I'm very close with a lot of my team and I want what's best for them. I want what's best for their families. And at times that's probably cost us because we've lost some good employees that have gone elsewhere. But I'd rather live that way than always be vengeful and trying to go after somebody. Like, be happy for somebody if they've made their life better.
Well, and I think a lot of this comes down to too many owners and too many, especially managers, middle managers, have such a short-term view on things. They only care about the day and they don't care about how many bridges they burn to get that one job done or to hit that number this month. And you see it really in the dealership world. Like you talk to these guys that go to dealerships and they're just, the dealership is a meat grinder. And it's like, kill or be killed kind of mentality. And it's this, I think it's part of it is this, what I call treadmill we're on in the dealership world of what I call hero to zero. Today on the 31st of the month, you're a hero. Tomorrow, the first of the month, you're zero again. And it's like businesses can take a long-term approach from a financial standpoint because they know they can absorb all this, but a technician can't. A technician can't absorb a bad month of pay. And I think we all have to look at it from the standpoint, you need to take more ownership of if you got a technician that's underperforming, whose fault really is it? It's kind of like I have a saying I tell people all the time. If I go to a shop and they need help and the shop's got a problem with wheels falling off and there's no shop policy that says that every lug nut's got to be torqued with a torque wrench, whose fault is it really the wheels are falling off? Is it really the technicians that are the problem? Or is it really the way that we're running the business?
Everything you said about dealerships there, I think we've seen come through in the survey as well. And I don't have that graph up right now, but there's definitely some discontentment on that side, right? And I spent a fair amount of time in the dealer world, and I do think that death by P&L every single month that's held over your head is really a detriment to the long-term future. And you look at Simon Sinek wrote a book called Infinite Game, I think it is, and it's such a great way of talking about business, about the need to look at it through a long-term lens versus just going for that monthly P&L. Like, what are you building to make yourself a sustainable business for the future? And, I even look at where this can get really painful is if, say you're 5 years from selling your shop, you're ready to get close to retiring and you're doing some succession planning. I've had shops talk about this to me where they're like, I don't care about developing techs. I don't care about, just like, I don't want to have to do this. And I said, do you know what that probably does to the valuation of your business if you don't have a sustainable system to be able to get people in to work for you in terms of being able to sell your business? What if you had a really good sustainable pipeline of people and a development system to bring these people up? if I'm somebody that's coming to look at potentially buying your shop, if you've got that, that's a major headache that's checked off that I don't have to worry about. Or if you've got a system that I can tweak a little bit and make it a little bit more my own, I'm not starting from scratch with it. That makes your business far more attractive. So just because you're close to retirement doesn't mean you take your foot off the gas with this. And then if you're not close to retirement, you still have a long way to go. Even more reason, like you should be developing your own people. Come up with a system that actually develops them. You're going to be much happier. I can guarantee that in the long run.
Right. Well, and the other thing is too is people can do something about it. I know that this is going to sound insane, but when my son was 18 years old, the local tech school told him it was going to be 2 years to get into a program because that was the wait. And I said, I don't know about you. I talked to my wife. I said, there's no 18-year-old kid going to wait 2 years to do anything. And we were talking about this because we were growing really fast. I actually started my own technical school and ran it out of our shop at night. It's called the Iowa Training Academy. We partnered with ADTC out of Ohio. They had the curriculum, and we did it. We ran a program at night, and it wasn't a full-fledged, like a YO Tech level program. It was a 10-week program, but at least, we could take a kid that worked at Taco Bell and get him a job working at Penske. He was entry level, and it really worked out good. And there were so many ancillary things that came along with it. Penske started coming to us saying, we want you to train our high-level people, which really was where we made our profit from it. Like, we made no money training these kids. Like, it was actually a loss. But it was the connections I built. And I had a sustainable labor funnel, and I had just interviewed these kids for 10 weeks. I knew which ones I wanted.
Where did you get that mindset from? Because I feel like that is far different than a lot of shops that are out there, right? I think a lot of shops might go more of the, I just need somebody to help me fix something today. Like, rather than maybe looking at it through that lens of that long term, what are we going to do to fix this for the long haul?
My mechanism on it, or the way I looked at it, was I am very good at seeing things others don't see. And what I saw from that was not, I was going to make money training people, which I didn't. I actually lost money at that. It was being able to charge for high level training. And it was also my ability to get in with fleets. So I would have never been able to break into Penske and get Penske to see me as a resource. But when I started to have labor that they needed, now I was a resource. Now I got in front of the big guys. Now they needed me. And honestly, my major plan with that, it was a marketing tactic. I spent no money on marketing, zero. And yet I got United Rentals, Penske, Brown National Lease. I got all these companies to come to me because they needed what I offered. They didn't think they needed my repair service. What they needed was the labor funnel I created, which ultimately became kind of an ancillary thing that really worked out well for our shop.
Uh, hey, I just give you credit for having that mindset, right? And I think that's something where a lot of us shop owners could maybe open our eyes a little bit, right? And think a little bit differently. And maybe just because something's been a certain way for decades doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way moving forward. So how do you look at that through that long-term lens, and knowing that, if you're in that building and your job is to make that business successful, what are you doing to do it so that it's not successful just tomorrow, but it's successful for a while? And it can be. And just, I think the more you can look at it from that macro level and how you support the school so they don't go away, right? Like, it might seem like a pain in the butt to go in and speak to a class, or maybe to get them a tool that they need to run their program, or show them how to use a tool. Any example, you're looking at building your pipeline for the future. And if you're involved in a way where it's not just showing up and asking for something from the school, the likelihood that you're actually going to have a quality relationship with that school, and that they're going to refer people to you and probably give you more information than they'd give other shops, is going to be more and more likely, right? So, like, that's an example of an area where, are you doing it, or are you just talking about doing it? And if you're just talking about doing it, you're not going to improve. You're going to continue to fight this issue where you can't find technicians. And I still have a long ways to go in my career. I don't want to continue to chase my tail here. Like, I want to see true improvement with our industry in this regard. And guess what? If you're building your own technicians, guess what you're not doing? You're not stealing them from your neighboring shop, which means it's less likely that your neighboring shop's going to steal techs from you. And, like, it's just maybe a healthier way to go about this, and something that yeah, maybe I'm hoping for the best there. But when I was a kid, I've talked a lot about this. When I was a kid growing up in a shop, it was a cardinal sin to steal tech from your neighboring shop. And over the years, when everybody got desperate, the rules kind of went out the window and it changed. And so I would love to see our industry get back to that kind of that honor system a little bit and not just the cutthroat way that it is right now to where we develop our own people and we're doing a good job at it and hopefully not taking a tech from our neighboring shop. Even though I was involved in the recruiting business for a long time, it's one of those where I think when you take a step back and look at it, you're like, yeah, that's what I was taught when I was young. I just happened to start a recruiting business, which is the opposite of what my dad told me to do a long time ago.
Right. One thing I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about something that it's a phrase that is not used in this industry, and that's net promoter score. And if you could talk about the net promoter score, what it is, how you find out, but then also there's some really alarming data in this net promoter score, and that is what is the automotive industry doing wrong? Because there is a massive gap, and it is going in the wrong direction from what I'm seeing.
For the diesel folks that are out there, there is some good news. We're far better than what the automotive side is in terms of technician satisfaction. Very alarming on the automotive side. So just so you know, the way that we come up with the score is we ask the respondents if they would recommend, how likely they would be to recommend this industry to a friend. So the promoters are nines and tens. The passives, the ones that are kind of in between, are sevens and eights. And the detractors are any score from 1 to 6. So if they come on that scale of 1 to 10, and they say that they're 4 likelihood to refer this industry to a friend or family member, then they are listed as a detractor. So then ultimately you subtract the detractors from the promoters, and that's how you come up with the score. Well, in 2026, our net promoter score for automotive technicians was negative 66, which is down 50. It was negative 58 in 2025. Diesel technicians kind of stayed the same and actually got a little bit better from 2025. So in 2025, they were negative 26. In 2026, they're negative 24. So slight increase in that satisfaction level amongst technicians, but still long way to go, right? Of all technicians on the diesel side that responded, only 21% were listed as promoters, so ranked in a 9 or a 10. The
So it's
passives,
still not looking good for the industry.
no, not as a whole, right? And I think you still look at the room for improvement on the detractor side. 45% of diesel technicians that responded to this would not recommend this industry to a friend or family member. That's still pretty tough to take, right? And that's something where, as we put the survey out, we don't want to cast a negative message around the industry or around the position itself. We just want to drive awareness to the fact that, guess what, guys, we got some work to do. We've got to get better in some way, shape, or form. And so clearly there's some discontentment with the industry. There's some folks that are not very happy with the industry, but almost half of technicians wouldn't recommend this industry to a friend or family member on the diesel side. That's definitely alarming.
Do we have any data that shows what that's about? I mean, you've had years of experience of analyzing this data. Do we have any things we can point to say this is what technicians, why they're leaving the industry, or what we can do to improve this score?
Yeah, I think when we look at the current satisfaction rates of their current employer, so on these two different charts, we've got satisfaction with current employer by industry. So this one is broken out into automotive and diesel techs. I like this one because it's the easiest to kind of comprehend. But if you look on the right-hand column there, you can look and see shop provides adequate paid training. Only at 47% of diesel techs say that they get adequate training. The shop provides the equipment I need to get my job done, 63%, which is actually up 5% from the year before. But when you look at that, shop provides the equipment I need to get my job done. What did we just talk about with what technicians really, really want? Only 63% of technicians are saying that their current shops provide that. Shop provides fair compensation. We're significantly better here than our automotive counterparts, and that 67% of diesel techs say that their shop provides fair compensation. That'd honestly be better than what I would have thought before getting the survey results. I feel valued and respected by management, only 55%. That's actually up 8% from year over year. I would recommend this shop to a friend. Only 53% would recommend their own shop to a friend, which is crazy to me, right? Like that tells you everything you need
Right.
to know that, hey, maybe we need to take
Well,
this
it
a little
tells
bit.
us what it tells us is that's the reason why you can't hire anyone because
Yeah.
we need to focus on our own employees as part of our funnel. We talk about this from a customer standpoint that it's a lot easier to get more out of the customers we have than to get new customers. But kind of the same thing happens with employees. It's a lot easier to get more out of the current employees we have than trying to hire new and different employees. But also, I mean, they're showing us that employees don't even want to work there. You know what I mean? Like this is some crazy facts.
Yeah, and I ultimately, and the last one I'll point out on here because it's something we talked about before, but only 38% of diesel techs said that their shop management communicates well. So and that again is up 6% year over year. So we're actually moving in the right direction. But going back to what we talked about before, and that communication is missing in a lot of cases, that points right to that diesel side saying, hey guys, we need to be better at communicating. We need to be better there. So ultimately, when I talked about rating yourself 1 to 10, this is a perfect list to do that on. So if you're a shop that's out there listening, you can download this report by going to wrenchway.com. It's free. Download the report, go through each of these and rank yourself 1 to 10, and maybe even have your own staff rank you on it, right? Have them kind of go out and tell you what they think about your shop. And you don't have to use these exact questions. I think they're pretty good questions, but I'm obviously biased. Whatever works best for you to drive communication, just do it. And if you can use this list as a way to help you, more power to you because I think it'll help you a lot.
I do have a question though, getting into pay structures, because that seems to be the biggest issue that we're seeing with technicians. And we're seeing that automotive technicians are the least satisfied compared to other ones. Do we think that has something to do with flat rate and pay scales? I mean, do we have any data that we can talk about pay scales and what technicians really want?
Yeah, you're spot on with that. We see that feedback year over year. As the graph that I'm looking at right now, you can see the preferred pay structure by type of shop. Dealerships, they're struggling here, right? Because they are largely a lot of that flat rate. And there's a lot of automotive fixed and kind of combined in here. So it's not maybe an exact true reflection of that diesel shop that's out there. But I think what you're seeing is a lot of response saying that we want the hourly with a bonus. Ironically, last year this kind of shifted where it flip-flopped. Hourly or salary was our highest ranking preferred pay structure last year. This year it flip-flopped with hourly or salary with production bonus. I get the sense that a lot of people were thinking, okay, if I'm just getting straight hourly, that's going to be higher than if I had hourly plus the production bonus. And so maybe they were thinking that way. This year it came back as if you look, the preferred salary is hourly with the production bonus at 41% of respondents, hourly or salary at 23%, flat rate with a guarantee 22%, which even on the diesel side, I remember talking to a few folks at the last Diesel Connect that I was at where they had some technicians that truly love flat rate with the guarantee. I think their techs were making a lot of money. But the traditional flat rate model, you can see there's not a lot of people that really, really want that. Yet a lot of shops continue to drive that model. And I just think that's one where you've got to have a conversation with. We hear it a lot with aging technicians. If they're paid on flat rate, their body's slowing down a little bit, and now they're not able to produce what they once did. They get really, really frustrated.
Well, I think this is an opportunity for everyone in the industry, whether it be technicians or owners, to really think about what is driving this information. And it's a big talk about pay. But as an owner, how did you set your pay scale? I mean, so many owners that I talk to set their pay scale because that's what the guy down the street's charging. And it's like, well, what does that have to do with what you can afford to pay? And also, what does that have to do with the technician? Like, I never had to have a technician sit down in my office and say, I need a raise. You know why, Jay? Because every single time we talked to a technician, I would hand him a sheet and say, circle the number. And they would say, what? circle the number. How much money do you want to make? And we will get there together. I will show you how to do it. How many owners can really, truly sit down with a technician and say, how much do you want to make? This is how you get there.
You hit that squarely on the head in that a lot of times I don't think it's an unwillingness for shop leaders to pay their people. It's a lack of profitability that allows them to pay their people what they should be getting. And so at its core, I think that is an area where if you're a shop that's out there and you're struggling to get profitable enough to where you can pay your people, then you need to look for help, right? Can I get help from a consultant or a coach of some type and get myself in a better position to where I can be more competitive, because it's not going to get less competitive for technicians. It's not going to be easier to get these folks. And ultimately, if they're family, right, you want them treated right. You want them taking care of their families. You want them, if they want to drive a nice vehicle, drive a nice vehicle. Like you want to take care of them. And I think if you have that mindset, you're more than likely able to hold on to those people. You're able to create loyal people. If it's not me versus you, but it's working together and trying to get you the life that you desire.
Right. And I think that's something that more owners need to ask their employees is, how much money do you want to make? Stop asking, especially in interviews. Stop. I mean, I would literally tell a guy, I don't care what someone down the street thinks you're worth. How much do you want to make? And they had never been asked that question. No one had ever asked them how much money they want to make. And it's kind of sad. It's really sad that the way we treat employees is, well, and I get it, right? From a true financial standpoint, what is an employee really worth, Jay? Well, in our free market, they're worth what the replacement costs, or you could say they're worth what they can make. But what motivators have we given them to make more money? Or better yet, what motivators have we given them to produce more? Flat rate is great in a lot of ways. It's great for owners. It's not always great for technicians. I'm a firm believer in a hybrid pay scale,
Same.
especially for being in the Midwest, where we have this thing called rust. There's a lot of stuff that are outside forces, aren't really the technician's fault, that they just get, and that's why so many guys get discouraged. They have 1 or 2 bad weeks and there's no safety net, and it's catastrophic to them.
I had a friend who used to be on flat rate a long time ago come to me and say what really pushed him out of being a technician was that multiple weeks he had to go home and explain to his wife why they weren't going to get a paycheck. And he said, until you've been in that situation where you go home and because no work's coming in the door, you've got no check to show to your family. He said, it's heartbreaking. How do you have that conversation with your spouse if you're not bringing any income home or very little? And that's where shops, I truly think, need to look through the lens of a technician. If they're not able to take care of their family because of the way you're paying them, you need to change something.
Well, and I think we all have to look at it from a sustainability standpoint. You're not going to be able to keep that technician long. He's going to leave. I mean, it's crazy. It's like I had a shop. It's actually the shop I sold. I was telling the staff there, they were paying the part-time kid that was coming in on the weekends. He was a teenager coming in on nights and weekends and cleaning the place. And he was making $10 an hour and he asked for a raise. And they said, well, we're not going to give you a raise. He went down the street and is making pizzas at the gas station and making $6 an hour more than they're willing to pay him to clean toilets. Like, the kid only asked for $1. Like, I didn't think he was that unreasonable, but it's just like, guys, you got to be reality out there. Like, you have to be competitive in the market.
Well, that always drives me crazy. He's asking for $1. Like, when you look at the bottom line of your business, a person like
The kid's working like 10 hours a week. It's nothing.
it would literally not move anything on your, you're just being stubborn at that point, right? Like, come on, like, work with them a little bit.
Right. Well, and it's not that. It's about, really look at what you're losing. If you lose a part-time person, or say you've got a retiree that's he's your go-getter, your gopher, I call him. Hey, go get this, go get that, deliver parts, maybe delivers a truck or something once in a while. What's it going to cost you to replace that person? And it's kind of like technicians. People, why can't afford to pay a technician that? You're losing $10,000 a week. Every week you don't have a technician filling that bidding. You can't afford not to have a labor funnel.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's, I think the phrase tripping over dollars to get the dimes is very common in our industry. I think we do that a lot. And
Well, I think we do too much on pride. I can't do that. Okay, why?
Why now?
Why can't we do that?
Yeah.
Like, what is stopping us from doing this? What is stopping you from providing every single thing that an employee needs from the minute they get there? Like my shop, this is not kidding. And I know not everybody can do this, but my guys literally went to grandma's house 3 days a week for lunch.
That's awesome.
Because my mom owned a house across the street. So we would shut the shop down and go over there for lunch. Like to me, that's really treating your people like family.
Yes.
But how hard is it to put a couple of sodas and some snacks in the break room so guys don't have to leave and go to the gas station and lose 20 minutes once or twice a day?
Literally donuts, right? Like it's nothing. And that's where at some level we just got to get out of our own way a little bit. Like I think we've been conditioned to be so conservative that it ends up costing you a lot more money than it's gaining you. And so rather than just fighting that, simple stuff can go a long way, and simple stuff shows that you care. And I think that's what helps drive. And do you have to get everything to
Well, it
everybody?
does.
No, you like be
No.
smart with what you're offering and make sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on the business. But I think a lot of times, and my last point I'll make on that is a lot of times somebody won't pay a lot of money for a quality tech. And I just look at it, and if you are confident in your interview system and the way that you're bringing somebody in, could you get burned by it? Absolutely. But if you pay somebody well, a lot of times I've seen that one person outproduce 2 or 3 other people. And I think being able to find those right people and not being afraid to pay is what helps. And if you do get one in, if you get somebody in that you paid a lot of money to and they're not what they said they were, because we hear that a lot too, let them go. Like it's okay to let them go if they're not fitting what they said they were. And so I'm not afraid to pay people. Like if they're good, I want the A players. I want the people that are true needle movers rather than me having to go around and try to push them around the shop and try to get them to do something. I want to have people that are high producers and that want to be a part of something better.
Yeah, and I think we could look at this from the opposite way. And I would absolutely challenge every owner out there to prove me wrong. The cheapest employee you have costs you the most money.
Ooh, I like that. I haven't heard that. That's good.
Well, if you think about it, who screws everything up? Which technician makes the most mistakes? It's not your guy making $50 an hour. It's your lube tech kid making 20.
Yep.
You know, who you have to think about that.
Yeah.
That, you think you're getting some smoking deal, but what deal are you really getting? Like, what's the true cost of that employee?
And what's the cost of a comeback? One comeback.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a lifetime customer, that's a lot of money that you just lost by trying to go about it the cheap way. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, and that goes along with another saying I tell owners that I've never seen anybody who can save their way into profits.
I totally agree.
All right, well, Jay, well, thanks for being on today. I appreciate it. Jay Goninen with WrenchWay. And today we covered topics about the Voice of Technician report. I think it's a really eye-opening report for owners out there and even technicians, because it really shines a light on the things that we should be talking with management and owners about that we all care about.
Yeah, and I can't thank you enough for having me on. What a fun conversation. Just appreciate the invite and hope to do it again in the future.
Thanks for tuning in to Diesel Stories. Be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and join us next time for more shop talk, insights, and stories from the diesel repair world.